forever since I've heard our intro.
Hello, welcome to Find Your Wise podcast, everybody. How are you doing, Yvonne, today?
Doing all right. How are you?
Oh my gosh, my week has been crazy,
Yeah.
and I think it will continue like that. So I think I have to get used to that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Life with children.
Yes. Oh my gosh, they keep you pretty busy.
You don't get one of your own. You don't get a life of your own until, well, even when they're grown, it's still not your life because something comes up and they're, taking your wonderful, delicious time, and I love it.
Yes. I have one junior, and I was this weekend ironing his shirt because he was going to the prom with his friends. And I was, oh my gosh, next year it's going to be him. Get a little emotional. Yeah.
It's very emotional, but once our kids grow up, we're like, hey, I did something right. They're contributing to society like I wanted them to.
That's fantastic. So, welcome back, everybody, to Find Your Wise podcast. And today we've been talking about a very good conversation. And it's a topic that it's really powerful. And especially because once you start and master it, you can really transform your life. And we're talking about the power of setting boundaries without guilt. Because if we don't set boundaries for ourselves, life really makes sure to set it for us.
Yes.
When was the last time that you said yes to something and you really wanted to say no?
Today.
And look, especially as women, we really believe that we have to be nice and always available. So we're taught not to be selfish. So, but hold on. Sometimes it's time to set boundaries and really set things how it's supposed to go.
Exactly. Like you said, especially as women, it sometimes feels like they put us through some sort of people-pleasing program when we're growing up. Be kind, be cute, all of that. I mean, men get it too. They have different boundaries than most women. But yeah, that's exactly what it's like for us sometimes.
Yeah, and the problem is that it's kind of designed to give away our own power. And it's tough sometimes because sometimes we are doing things that we really don't want it to do. And then we feel that regret and that taste in our mouth. We say, why did I say yes to this?
Yes, exactly. And it's one thing that we need to remember, and especially as women, because we can get labeled very easily, but you can still be a very kind person and have strong boundaries, because it doesn't mean that you're mean or anything else. It just means that, you have your limits, and boundaries can be fantastic for relationships, which a lot of people have troubles understanding, because when you're very clear with your needs, it helps other people understand you better.
Yes, that's a really good point. And let's explain a little bit more about boundaries. Boundaries are not like a wall. In fact, there's doors. So imagine a doorman in a building. He only will allow people to enter, the one that has been authorized. If they're not authorized, they're not supposed to go there. So it's the same thing. You allowed people to go in your life. And it's not that they don't go in your life, it's that you set time, space, and energy to dedicate to those people. And you give them enough without really deplete your energy.
Yep. Because they can steal your energy completely. And there's a saying that's really, well, I think it's really popular because I've heard it, so it had to have been popular, but it's you teach people how to treat you. And I didn't understand that for a really long time. But like you said, they're not walls. Boundaries can be doors. And the way that I look at it sometimes is maybe they're like an instruction manual with the teaching people how to treat you. It's so that other people understand how to have a good, healthy relationship with you. And they can empower you, and you can model that to other people, whether you're a business leader or a parent. As a parent, you have to have boundaries too, or if you're even working in your community, it also empowers other people to know that it's okay to have boundaries.
Yeah. Now that you mentioned that, I remember that I mentioned once in the podcast that when I was a teenager, I remember that in my country, you need to dry the clothes. Back then, you need to dry your clothes. So I remember I put my mother's clothes in a regular hanger, but then my father's clothes are organized very pretty and very nice, like my mother used to do. And she kind of got mad And my father asked her, why do you get mad? Look how she put my clothes compared to yours. And he said, she did exactly what you do. And that's the thing. Like when you said we teach people how to treat us, people are going to treat us the way we treat ourselves. And if we don't prioritize ourselves, people won't do it either. So that's kind of part of the boundaries portion.
No, I like that. And it's, it's true, talking about protecting your energy. And it's something that we have said 1,000 times on, well, maybe not 1,000, so we don't have 1,000 episodes yet, but we've said it a lot. And that, protecting your energy is protecting your productivity and everything else, because burnout is not a badge of honor. And boundaries are going to help tremendously with that. You need to protect your time and your energy. And when you do that, you can actually be more focused and more productive.
Yeah.
So it's really important to have them.
Yes. And sometimes, for example, when we set those boundaries, especially at the beginning, we tend to feel guilty.
Oh, yeah.
But in reality, that guilt is showing us that we are removing from something that we're accustomed to do. But that also comes from patterns that we have learned, could be from our childhood, through the culture that we lived, the early expectations and experiences that we've been taught. It really help us in a bad way. In this case, it really take us to the place that we feel guilt, and those are the type of things that we need to learn and understand. Like you mentioned before, that boundaries are really healthy because it teaches people how to respect us. And people that are respectful or healthy people, they respect it. But toxic people, they kind of resent them. But it's not your responsibility how they feel. Exactly. It's your responsibility to set your boundaries, and especially communicate it in a healthy way. That is your part. You need to communicate it properly, but you also need to hold yourself accountable. Because if you don't do it and then you said, today I'm going to do this and tomorrow you do something different, then people don't get the message.
Exactly. Sorry, losing my voice already. Something that you need to keep in mind when you're setting your boundaries, and like Indira was saying, is to protect your peace. But you have to remember that your peace is not up for debate. And unfortunately, we do that to ourselves a lot. We allow it to be up for debate. You don't have to negotiate your mental wellness, or, there's a saying, and I love this one, I've actually made a meme out of it, that you do not have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. And I think that's actually really a profound saying, because we do that. And again, I go back to, especially as women, I'm going to upset a lot of men tonight, I think, but it's true. Women tend to be nurturing. So we often set ourselves on fire to keep other people warm. We can let people know where we stand, and where they stand in our lives by saying something, you're really important to me, but I'm not able to show up fully. Sorry, guys, tired, long week for both of us. And let them know you just don't want to commit halfway, that they're so important to you that, you can't give it all right now. And so it's better that you need to just take a back seat. And that doesn't have to be negotiated either. That's not up for debate.
Oh, that's good. That's really good, because like you mentioned, we were talking before, no one is going to respect the boundaries if you don't reinforce them.
Exactly.
So especially we have to make sure that we reinforce them and we'll calm, consistent. And it really, that's where growth happens. And you can't blame people for crossing the lines. If you specifically didn't define that line clearly and communicate it clearly. So that's the portion that is very important, that is in our responsibility. And sometimes we even have to set the boundaries within ourselves. Things that we are allowed to do and things that we're not allowed to do it. Because if we're setting boundaries for others, we also have to respect their boundaries as well.
Good point.
Yeah.
That's something I don't think a lot of people, they're really demanding on, don't cross my boundaries, but then we do forget sometimes to respect other people's space and their boundaries.
Yeah. And moving a little bit to the leadership world. Sometimes as a leader, we tend not to set boundaries clearly, and that really affects the team significantly.
Absolutely.
Yes, if as a lead we don't intentionally reinforce those boundaries, or we feel guilty, what happens is that creates confusion within the team, burnout, resentment. even among the team members. And some example, like we were talking about the energy, that's nothing different in the leadership world. If you are not putting correct boundaries, you can, for example, deplete your energy, and that causes you to make poor decisions. Another thing will be that, for example, we create inappropriate expectations, for example, because in that case, what you do is that we set expectations because, like you mentioned, people pleasing, we accept everything, and then people don't really understand what they need to do because they have confusion, and we are committing more than we were supposed to do, causing at the same time burnout. And more importantly, as a leader, we lose our credibility. And why is that? Because if you said that you're going to do something because the other team is asking you for that, but you don't set clear expectations, then your team will burn out and say how he's leading their team. So they need people see what you do as a leader. And if things are not appropriate, some people tell, but others, for example, they decided to go to another organization. So we have to make sure that we really create limits, because if we don't create those limits, then our team won't grow significantly.
Yeah, it's true. And I have had those jobs in corporate before where you honestly didn't know what was expected of you. And you can, then you'd go too far and somebody would get upset, or you're not doing enough and somebody get upset. So I totally agree. In any corporate situation, as a good leader, you definitely need to set expectations with anybody. Start as a new hire and let them know these are not just a job description, but these are the expectations of being part of this team. And I think that's vital if you want to have a great team. I actually had a fantastic, I know I've talked about another boss before that was really good, but my first job in mortgage was like that. I had the best leadership there that was very clear on expectations and how they needed to be met by each person in each role. And the only reason I left that position was because I moved to another state. And it wasn't even a huge paying position because it was my first role in mortgage, but I'm telling you, I judged every job I had after that by that team and by the way those leaders were, because they were so clear on what was expected. There was very little stress. You knew what you needed to be doing every day. Yeah. And it was a deal breaker for me in some other situations when I could see it wasn't going to be like that. And I'd be like, no, I'm not taking this job.
Yeah, and probably you can even have more work than in another job that you're doing, but just the fact that you know exactly what you have to do and what's expected from you is that you even go the extra mile.
Exactly.
And I would like to mention that, for example, there's a study, Deloitte, that they said that 77% of professionals say that they experience burnout in their current job. And none of those things are tied to that. Because sometimes burnout is because of the credibility, not setting clear expectations, or people pleasing and over promising. And then when the team has to do, they feel the burden inside.
Yeah, well, and it's really important for anybody, whether you're in a leadership position or if you're a team member. When you are going into a job, there again, you need to have your own boundaries. If they have clear expectations set out for you and you have your own boundaries, you know what you're willing and capable of doing. It can save you a lot of heartache also on the job, whatever level that you are. Correct. So hopefully you do have a good leader that understands those boundaries, and it can make a great job.
Great. Yeah.
So now we're going to dive into one of my favorite topics. Of course, it's finance.
Oh, I love that topic too.
Well, and it's really important because a lot of people struggle with setting boundaries in their finances. It's kind of like what you said at the beginning. It's when was the last time you said yes to something you want to, but when was the last time that you gave money to somebody or something and then you're like, oh, instant regret, probably instant resentment. And you're walking away thinking, I'm mad, and I don't even know if I'm mad at them for asking or me for giving.
Yeah.
That's the boundary you need to set.
Yeah, it's true.
A lot of people look at budgeting as very restrictive. They think it's telling them what they cannot do. which if that's the case, then they're actually setting it up incorrectly. You need to talk to me, I'll help you out. But if you change your mindset on that and you look at budgeting as a boundary with yourself and not a restrictive document, it's about a spending plan for you so that it aligns with what your plans are, what your hopes are. So if you look at it like that, it can really help a lot. And when people keep asking, I know it's really hard at work. I know this last week my whole week was talking about boundaries with finance. But one of the things there's actually two really good things that you can say, because there's always those things coming up at work where they're like, we're donating to another birthday party or retirement fund, whatever. There's always somebody asking for money.
There's always something. Yeah.
So you can set up a generosity fund inside your budget. And a lot of people don't think about, they think I'll have fun money or something set aside. But if you actually set up a section of your budget with generosity, so it can be for impromptu lunches or, the $25 you contribute to a gift for somebody at work, it can help a lot. It'll alleviate a lot of the stress. It'll, the anxiety that comes when you're like, oh, they're going to ask again. But then when that money's gone for the month, then it's done. But then you can come up with saying, you know what? I can't contribute to that right now, that trip, that gift or whatever. And that should be okay. You don't have to negotiate what you can and cannot do with somebody.
And let me tell you that the frustration comes when you have your budget and you know that you're going to get out of your budget because of that. But if you budget that, definitely you wouldn't have that regret because you know that you have something aside for that. And that gives you like freedom.
Well, and that's when you can tell them, you know what, I apologize, or don't say I apologize because you didn't do anything wrong, but just basically say, we all have a tendency to say, I'm sorry. But just say, I'm really sorry. I have set a limit on eating out this month, so I'll join you next time or something. Let them know that you would, you're not rejecting them, but that, you'll join them next month. It's just not going to fit the budget right now. And like you said before too, there's always going to be people that push on that. And there's, but the people that matter aren't going to.
Yes.
And as a business, especially entrepreneurs, here's where we run into it. There's not a lot of people asking us for money per se, but a lot of people that are friends and family, especially when you are an entrepreneur, are going to assume access to us, the free advice, the discounts, stuff like that. So I have a little tip for you there too, because you want to help, but you think about all the time and the energy that you have put into becoming the expert that you are in the field that you're working in. And it's valuable. We don't give it away for free because it's expensive to start a business. So what you can tell them is you'd say, you know what, I'd love to support you. Can I send over my services list for you? So it's not cold, but it's very clear, reminding them you're running a business. You're not a favor factory.
Oh, that's a good one.
So, well, and if you have somebody that also is in business, something else you might consider is doing an equal value barter.
Yeah.
That's a way of getting it, sometimes it's really beneficial because I've even worked with other coaches that are in a niche that I am not in, and we can definitely help each other out, when we run into issues.
Yeah.
But the hardest one is when you're dealing with friends and family. That's hard when it's talk about money. Saying no to a family member when they're asking you for money can feel almost impossible to deal with because you feel so guilty if you say no.
Yeah.
And if you have been the go-to person in the past where people come to ask for money, it's even worse, but you can still love your family and set your boundaries. Some of the things that you can say to them in those situations is, you know what, I'm just not in a position to help financially right now, but I care and I do want to support you in other ways. It's not being selfish. You're being very responsible. So you need to remind yourself sometimes that boundaries are not a rejection, even if the other person feels like it is. And a lot of times they're going to feel like it. But it's about sustainability. It's sustaining yourself and your hopes, dreams, plans, and the relationship.
Yeah.
So you don't want to keep giving if you can't afford it, because then that's when resentment sets in.
And that's when it comes like the same thing that you said, setting budget for yourself. That budget is for yourself. And that also helps you to address any conversation. Because like I mentioned, for example, my kids, they ask for something and it's out of the budget. We already used the budget for this month.
Yep.
And that gives you clarity when you have to answer those questions because you have a direction.
Well, and one thing that's really cool about it too is if it happens more than once and you do have your generosity budget and you let them know, hey, I'm tapped out this month. I already have my limit. This was set. That's a boundary that you're going to set. And again, you're going to teach them how to treat you. If you do it another time and you're like, again, I'm sorry, but I'm tapped out, they're going to learn pretty quick. You're not the go-to person anymore.
Yeah. But then now that we mentioned that, let's talk about how we can work in transforming our mindset and
yes.
shifting our mindset in terms of that. So some of the things that we can do is, for example, permission. You are allowed to say no without explaining yourself. And that goes to what you were saying. Just saying no, it's more than enough. But sometimes we want it to go, and especially women, we start explaining the reason why we can't. And then the other person start justifying and trying to help us to find solution for something that at the beginning, you didn't want to do it.
Exactly.
So if we just said, sorry, for example, thank you for your invitation, but I have already commitment. Mm-hmm. Can be even taking a bath. That was a commitment that you planned?
Exactly.
And that was your commitment. You didn't need to explain what you were doing.
Mm-hmm. It's like, I don't know if you've seen it, but I always go to memes. I'm obviously spending way too much time on social media.
Maybe.
That's why I'm one of those people when I'm laying in bed at night trying to sleep, I'm doom scrolling Instagram. So I'm sorry, I'm a terrible example. But you see this one where it says, I'm sorry, I can't, I'm busy. And it's somebody sitting on a couch with their chips and their dog in a onesie, like an animal onesie. And I'm like, okay. I get it. That is so true.
Yes.
Well, I agree. You don't have to justify your no, with a big novel or anything. Sometimes to appease yourself, like you said, we have a tendency to over-explain ourselves as women. But sometimes it does help just to give a little bit, even if you just have a standard phrase like, I'm sorry, but that just doesn't work for me. That could just be your go-to if it's in the back of your brain, because that is a full sentence. Sometimes no, I agree. I mean, a lot of people say no is a full sentence, and I agree, but sometimes that can be abrupt and people get offended. And when you just say no, a lot of people are going to start digging and pushing, and that's where you're going to get more pushback. So, and I agree, it is a full sentence, and I wish people would honor that more. But like I said, just having that go-to phrase, that doesn't work for me. And if you stay calm and kind of clear and grounded, it's going to let them know that you mean what you say, but without being considered aggressive. Because, women, we got to be nice, can't be aggressive. Is this like a show for just women tonight? I don't know. I think we're talking from our hearts tonight and maybe some of our own situational awareness.
Yeah, and appreciate, because you can say no with grace.
You can.
When you show appreciation and you have other commitments, it's fine. Another one is prioritization. Mm-hmm. Did you know that for every yes that you said to someone, you say no to something that you care about? Mm-hmm. So it's very important that we choose wisely and the things that are important.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
We get to talk. You guys should see us off camera. When we get to talking, we're like, that's what happens when you're friends. Yes. But one thing I don't think a lot of people understand is that every time you do that, when you say yes and you mean no, it's actually chipping away at your boundaries that then eat away at your confidence. Because how many times have you gone and agreed to something that you wish you hadn't, and you go away, ask yourself, why did I say yes again? So you're questioning your own judgment and your ability to stand your ground. And so,
let me tell you, there's a moment that then after you say yes, you start looking for excuses to take you out of that yes.
Oh, yes. I'm not going to say, I almost said, this is what I'll say, but I'm not going to give away my cues.
No, don't give it away.
Because then somebody asks me to do something and I give them this cue, they're going to be like, you're not really.
Yeah. But it's very important that boundaries are a leadership skill, not a weakness.
Agreed.
So it's very important that you understand that the more successful you are, or even in business or in life, it doesn't matter which area in your life, boundaries are important, because that's what differentiates from people pleasing to the people that really understand what they want me to do. And it's when they set those boundaries. In fact, I've been listening to Brené Brown. I really love her. We were talking about her. And there's a thing that she said, Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others.
I love it. I love it. I love her too. Like I told you, I listen to her when I fly so I can calm down. You know, and there are a lot of people that don't realize that they need to set boundaries because they're so used to feeling the way that they do, which is not a good thing. Keep in mind, here's a few things to look for in yourself that might signal to you that you need some boundaries.
Okay.
One is if you feel anxious or drained after dealing with certain people, you might need a boundary.
Okay.
Yeah. All of a sudden, everybody's going,
Yeah, me too.
This is hilarious because if you find yourself avoiding commitments that you've already agreed to, like you said, if you're looking for an excuse to get out of it,
Yeah.
then you might need a boundary. If you say yes and immediately feel regret, I'm starting to feel like Jeff Foxworthy. Here's your sign. You might need a boundary. And if you're constantly rescuing others at the cost of your own time, money, and mental health, you don't need to. You need a boundary. And again, here we go. As women, we need to let go of our fixer roles. We're not here to fix everybody. So hard to hear because we're naturally nurturing.
Let me give you a deep coaching question.
Oh no.
Who am I willing to disappoint? Because as women, like you mentioned, we are always willing to disappoint us than disappointing others. So we need to put in which set of priorities we are, and then understand am I disappointing myself or I'm preferred to disappoint someone else? So sometimes by, like you mentioned, we're saying yes to that, even though it's against our will. We are approving that person and disappointing ourselves. So it's tough.
I love that though. Now you can make me think hard.
Yeah. Some practical tools that we can implement to set boundaries is decide what matters most to you, not to other people. So the same thing, disappointment. Who are you willing to disappoint? Communicate clearly and without over explaining, like we just mentioned, and you can do it with grace. And very important, stick to your boundaries without apology.
I think for me, that's almost the hardest one because I always start, I'm so sorry, or I apologize for what?
Yes, I know. I think we may change it for thank you for whatever they offer.
Yes. I like that.
Yeah, let's do that. So remember, no long explanation, no apologies. Be grateful, smile, appreciate. Short, simple, and strong. Just make sure that you stick. But to do that, you have to be very clear of what you want.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't know what you want, then it makes it difficult to say yes or no to anything.
Yes.
But we have to remember that setting boundaries are not rejection. I think that's the big thing. Because even when somebody sets a boundary with us, remember that they're not rejecting you. Okay. It's a redirection to something that is really important to you and your own values, or if somebody's doing it to their values, and you have to honor that. Every no that drains you and leaves you open to saying yes to something that fulfills you. Okay. Because we all have those things. Like I said, whether somebody asking for money to do something, to help out, and we don't want to, then you're taking up time and energy from something that would really make you happy. And you're not selfish for having limits, although we feel we are. We're humans. We all have limits, and pretending that we don't is only going to lead us to feeling resentful and exhausted. Yes. You have to remember, you don't owe anybody an apology for honoring your own needs.
Oh, great. If today's message really woke something into you, good. That was the idea, even to me.
I say, I'm one of the hosts. I'm like, I'm thinking hard on this.
Yes. That's your inner power asking you to choose yourself, to choose peace over people pleasing, to choose growth over guilt. This is your time. And this is our time. This is our space. We need to protect our energy, lead our life without apology, and just make sure that we keep working strong and continue growing.
Like we said, grow with us. Obviously, we're growing on this one too.
Yes. We really appreciate that you take your time, and please share this message if there's someone, any woman or man or kid or young teenager that they're growing and they're really pleased, they share this message with them, and just make sure to like, subscribe, and share.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, Stacy.